Welcome back today to Prime Your Midlife. And today it's the tale of two midlife coaches. And I'm going to dive in today on making that decision that perhaps you've always put off. And Daniel Glide here today is going to help us with that. Daniel, welcome to Prime Your Midlife. How are you today?
I'm really well, thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me along.
It's a real pleasure. I am looking forward to this. So for people that are listening, Daniel didn't quite know just how bad things were, but I'll let him tell the story. Daniel, just let people understand your anxiety, some of the dips that you were in. What was causing that for you?
So what it was, Chris, I think was doing something that was completely out of alignment with who I was. So I was quite fortunate, actually. I worked in a career that I'd chosen. I didn't fall into it. I deliberately went and did it. It was working in broadcasting, which is, I'd been a journalist probably since I was a young lad. I'd always written stories. I was fascinated by radio and television. So kind of in my late 20s, I made a plan, went away. You have to make a lot of sacrifices to get in that industry. Started off in news, made my way over to sport. So I was working as a sports broadcaster, Chris. I was going to see fantastic sporting events. I was mixing with athletes and, most of what I was doing, I would have done for free. It was fantastic. It was brilliant. It was a wonderful, lovely job. And I used to love telling people I did it too. I used to get a fantastic reaction, especially from other fellas when I said I work in broadcasting. I work for BBC Sport, and they'd be like, "Oh wow, do you know Gary Lineker and all this sort of thing?" And yeah, I work with Gary quite a lot. So yeah, and the trouble is with that industry, it's long hours, it's unsociable hours. So I didn't really have a social life anymore. I didn't really have any close friends anymore. I'd lost all those connections. I made this ridiculous decision because it's so competitive in my industry. I kept everybody at arm's length, so I had no real friends at work. I had lots of people I got on with, but so I was quite isolated, Chris. And I was just, it got to a point where I was feeling bad, and I was feeling bad every day, and that was anxiety. So I would literally have a physical knot in kind of my solar plexus area. I used to worry a lot, and I'm not a worrying type of person. I would get physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausted very easily. I was suffering with insomnia. I even remember going to the doctor, and the doctor saying, well, have you got any stress in your life? And I was like, well, no more than usual, just give me some pills so I can sleep, please, doctor. And I think I just did think it was normal. I thought this is what happens when you've got a high-powered career and you're working hard and you're successful, and this is just what comes with it. It's stressful, right? And I don't think at the time I realized that there was anything wrong. And I thought I've got to the point where it then started to affect me physically. I was overweight. I was constantly ill. Probably for months, it felt like, Chris. I'd go from cold to flu to, my skin was bad. I used to get psoriasis and eczema and cold sores. And again, I tended to write it off. And then I think what happened was, so I made the big mistake of booking some annual leave in the middle of the Winter Olympics, which at BBC Sport is just a no-no. You don't do that. And I think I'd done that accidentally. I got my dates mixed up. So my wife had wanted to visit Amsterdam for a long time. She checked with me, are these dates right? Yeah, that's fine. We booked it. Then my boss at work says to me, you've booked off leave in the middle of the Winter Olympics. So then I had this decision to make. I was like, well, what do I do? Upset my employer or upset my wife? So I chose to upset my employer. And it's probably the first time in a long time I put anything and anybody before my career, right? So Winter Olympics, I didn't really do much on it. Now, normally what you do in the Winter Olympics is you spend 3 weeks solidly at work, 10 hours a day, sometimes awful shifts if it's in a different part of the world, if it's early in the morning, late at night. And that was just expected. That's what you did. And we felt privileged to do it because, what a wonderful thing to work on the Olympics. So this didn't happen to me this time. So I was a kind of peripheral figure. I was doing sort of late night replays, and I had my 4 days off in Amsterdam. So I went to Amsterdam and sampled the delights of their coffee shops there. Now, what that did for me, Chris, is that got me out of my mind into my body, and it made me better. Now, I wouldn't recommend that to anybody as a cure, but it just so happened that break and that time away and that not being involved in that big event like I normally would be made me better physically, right? So I suddenly thought, hang on, there's something in this. So taking myself out of that stress and anxiety and that full-on work with no work-life balance made me better. So I thought there's a connection here. So funnily enough, that year we had lots of holidays. We went on lots of sort of city breaks to European cities and things. So I had lots of time where I was taking myself away from work, and it kept making me feel better, and I kept feeling less anxious and less worried and less stressed. And I thought, well, actually, maybe life isn't like that. This isn't normal to feel like that. This isn't a normal thing to do. And then in the summer, this was 2018, in that summer, I read the book, The Secret. And what The Secret taught me is that the power to make change sits inside you. So it taught me that we're not a victim of circumstance. We are a sum of our choices and our decisions. And that if you give yourself the time and the space, you can make conscious choices and decisions rather than reactive choices and decisions. And that completely and utterly shifted my perspective of the world, Chris, completely. And there started a kind of a journey of self-development and self-improvement. And I started reading lots of books and about personal growth. I got heavily into spirituality. I felt a bit like I sort of reconnected with my soul, my genuine self. And what my genuine self said to me is, this is not the life for you, mate. You've chosen the wrong path here. This is not for you. So I was like, wow, how can that possibly be? This wonderful career in media that I'd worked all these years for, working in sports broadcasting, going to all these fabulous events. And I thought, I was amazed. So then at that point, I got some help. I got some coaching. I thought, right, I need some help here to find out what I do want to do. So yeah, over a period of time, I realized that I wanted to help and to serve. That's what I wanted to do, and do that directly. And I think actually that's probably why I became a journalist and got into broadcasting in the first place, because I thought I can change the world by telling the truth. And you realize very quickly that it's actually quite difficult to do that. So that's what I worked out I wanted to do. And also when lockdown came along and the pandemic, that gave me more time and space. Sport was cancelled for 3 months, so I wasn't doing very much. So I got lots of time and space to work out what sort of life I wanted to live. So I realized I wanted to live a more sustainable life. I wanted to live a more self-sufficient life. I didn't want to smash the hell out of the planet. I wanted to give myself the time and space to make conscious decisions about what I was eating, about how much traveling I was doing. Between us, my wife and I came up with this plan. It would always been something we'd thought of, probably.
If it's just possible, I really want to talk about the plan in a minute. Sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to go back and unpick a few of those things there that you brought to us.
Yeah.
Just first of all, in terms of your job, it does sound like every bloke's dream, commenting on BBC Sport, hanging out with some of those people. I'm sure there was a time when it was that halcyon vision of amazingness. Was there a time when you just were completely in your element and you just couldn't wait to get into work?
Yeah, I did. Absolutely, Chris. Yeah, I loved it. I got to go to 2 Open Golf Championships. I've been to Commonwealth Games, Rugby League Challenge Cup finals. I've done live Premier League football matches. As I said, worked on Wimbledon, Six Nations. I would do all that stuff for nothing. I'd be there as a punter. So to be there behind the scenes as a producer, yeah, loved it. Absolutely loved it. And yeah, it did give me a reason to get out of bed. But at the same time, I wasn't feeling good. That, I was not prioritizing my own well-being, Chris. I was prioritizing my career and always chasing the next opportunity, the next possible promotion. I always had a plan of where I wanted to get to and how I wanted to get there. Now, yeah, I did. I loved that job. I absolutely loved it, which is why I put it before everything and anyone, sometimes my relationships. And that's why it made me ill. That's why I drove myself into the floor, because I was very passionate about it. But what I realized was that I had to put myself first. And that actually, when I did that, when I decided I wasn't going to continue with that career, when it dawned on me. And so I let go of all that planning, all that scheming, all that constant, I used to wake up in the middle of the night worrying about this stuff. When I let go of all of that, bizarrely, suddenly all the opportunities came to me. So all this stuff I've been striving for and going after and planning and scheming and about came to me. Suddenly I got to direct network programs and things like that, which, I was never anywhere near doing previously. And I felt like there was something in that letting go, that not attaching to outcomes anymore, to kind of going with the flow a bit more.
And when you said you went to go and see the doctor, what prompted that visit? Because it takes a lot for a bloke to want to go and see the doctor.
Yeah, I couldn't sleep. And sometimes, this would kind of come up occasionally. I'd have the odd night where I couldn't sleep properly. And
can you just help us understand, when you say you couldn't sleep, how bad was it?
So I'd go to, I'd literally wouldn't sleep all night. So I'd go to bed. I wouldn't drop off. So that would start to annoy me. I'd start to get frustrated. So that would then, obviously, I was in no mode to sleep at that point. So I would get up. I think, well, this is pointless. And then once I'd get up, then the mind start going, and I start thinking about all the things that are coming up that I've got to do, this job, that job. How do I need to align with this person? How do I need to get myself in the right position for this opportunity? And it all start going and going, because that's what happened. I got to the point, Chris, where my mind just went 100 miles an hour. I would just skip from thought to thought to thought to thought. That's just how it went. That's how it worked. So yeah, I wouldn't sleep. Sometimes I'd doze off downstairs, maybe for an hour or two on the sofa, and then the alarm would go off at 6 o'clock in the morning because I've got to get up, go to work. And that would sometimes become a vicious cycle. Okay, normally I'd be so tired after that I would just pass out the next night, but sometimes I didn't. I'd start worrying about the fact that I wasn't going to sleep. I'd be like, oh my God, got an early start, got this to do at the weekend. I've really got to sleep, and that just make it worse. And so I think there was a period where it was almost 4 or 5 days where I'd barely slept. So that's when I went to the doctor and just said, you've got to help me.
And the doctor, interesting that he actually asked you that question, are you under stress? Because a lot of times we hear about practitioners not digging deep enough to try to come to the nub of the issue, which is causing the sleep. And when he said to you, are you under stress? How long did the conversation continue for him to challenge you on what was causing the stress?
He didn't challenge me, Chris. He didn't. So he asked me that. And like you, I think I was quite surprised. I just wanted to go in there, get some sleeping pills, go home and get a good night's sleep. And when he asked me that, I didn't even think about the answer. I thought, briefly, I thought to myself, am I under stress? I thought, no, this is nothing out of the ordinary. This is normal. This is, I work very hard. Yes, I am stressed because I work in a high-powered industry where, you work long hours, unsociable hours. But I thought that was normal. I didn't think that was unusual. So I said no, because I thought he meant had I lost a loved one or some sort of serious trauma. I thought that's what he was asking me about. I didn't realize that what I was putting myself through wasn't normal and was very unhealthy. But yeah, I mean, but we moved on very quickly when I said no, just give me sleeping pills, and he did.
So if he'd asked you some questions, that were digging deeper, and you then took that pressure away from the stress cooker. Do you think that by fixing some of the things that you've now managed to fix, you would have stayed to continue with your broadcasting media industry profession?
No, so I think it would have made it easier. Absolutely. I'd have been a lot more well. And I think actually, if I'd have got a bit more well earlier on and put a bit of space around my thoughts, I think I may have even realized quicker that it wasn't for me. I want to help people directly. That's what I feel like I'm for. That's what brings me joy. Now, don't get me wrong. Sports broadcasting brought me a lot of happiness. It was great, but it's not that sense of fulfillment that actually I realized that I was looking for, and I realized that I needed, and meaning, Chris. That's what I realized was very important, that I do something with meaning. And I also didn't like being in the place where, I used to have to travel quite a lot, and I didn't like what I was doing to the planet, and I wanted to have more time, more freedom, and more flexibility. So no, I wasn't. That was not going to be the future for me. I think what it might have done is if it had dug a bit deeper there, it might have just made me realize more quickly that what I was going through wasn't normal. I mean, it's common, but it shouldn't be normal to put your well-being so far down your list of priorities. And it may have given me a bit of a wake-up call there, but no, I don't think. I think this was always going to come to an end. That it wasn't my future.
And how much of this chasing the success and being the director, how much of that was sort of societal pressures that you felt you just had to continue to climb the ladder? Or was it partner pressure from Julie or parents? Tell me about some of those things that was just pushing you to continue to try to work those longer hours, chase the next big promotion.
Yes, I think it's a cultural thing, really, Chris. I think it comes from my upbringing and for what I saw as success. I saw my growth being climbing the ladder, getting bigger and better opportunities, taking on more and more responsibility. That's what my culture had taught me was success, earning more money, getting nicer cars, getting a bigger house. That's what my culture had always told me. That's what successful people look like. So that's what I was chasing. That's what I was trying to do. I was looking to get status, I think. I was looking for status, and that's what my culture had told me meant was success. So therefore, I would put myself, whatever I had to put myself through, and I'm quite a determined and quite a resilient character. So I would push through things I shouldn't have been pushing through. I'd have quite happily not taken any rest for days and days and days on end because I thought that's what successful people did. And that made me ill.
And knowing now what you know, we're going to get to the points of your breakthrough. Is it possible to be able to have that amazing career at the top of the ladder and still have a feeling of, I'm okay, I can not walk into every day with complete stress and anxiety and worry?
Yes, it absolutely is. And I say that to the people I work with now. You don't have to make the wholesale life change that I did. That was what worked for me. Yes, you can. And you've just got to be deliberate about it. And what you've got to do is you've got to prioritize your well-being. You've got to make sure you're getting enough rest and relaxation. You've got to be very deliberate about your work-life balance. And you've got to understand the physical problems that suffering with stress and anxiety will give you. You've got to have ways of managing that and dealing with that. And you absolutely can do that. I could have done that. Once I'd had a breakthrough and realized how to manage myself and how to put my self-care first, I could have continued in that industry and done it in a way where I was well and I was, not emotionally, physically and mentally exhausted. I think I was going about things in the wrong way. And again, in a way that my culture had taught me to do. And in some ways it was kind of, I remember growing up in my early 20s and I used to work with lots of people that worked in banking, and it was that behavior was glorified, to work 50, 60 hours a week and then to drink very heavily in order to avoid the stress and stuff that went with it, and not to eat very well. It was glorified behavior, and that's the environment in which I grew up.
And
But
some
yeah,
people actually do thrive and love that hustle. There are some people that say, I want to be at work from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, and then I want to carry on developing code and busting myself on programming. So it's not as if I'm saying this isn't something that you should do or shouldn't do, because some people absolutely enjoy that. When you had that doctor's appointment, if for anybody that isn't willing to go and see a doctor about how they're feeling, can you just give us some clues as to the symptoms that you were experiencing? I know there's quite a long list of things where your body was kind of waving a flag at you to say, Daniel, I'm not happy. Tell us about some of the things that you were experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, so when I actually went to the doctor, that was the insomnia. That's why I went, and I never reached out for help other than that, Chris. And it was only where I came to the kind of realization myself. But I was, for months, it happened sort of. It was probably the end of 2017. It was across Christmas and into January. I was just always ill. I was completely and utterly exhausted. My body was just telling me, you need rest. And I guess that's why I was constantly getting colds and flu, because it was my body's way of saying, right, sit in bed for a week. But I wouldn't do it, Chris. I would take all the rubbish you can buy from the pharmacy and fill myself up with coffee and carry on. And yeah, I'd always had a cold, just constantly sniffing and coughing, and my skin was bad. I used to get really bad psoriasis and eczema. I had fungal nail infections. I was just in a really bad way. And I was about 2 stone overweight, probably 2 or 3 stone overweight, even though I exercised a lot, Chris. I used to swim every day. I used to play a lot of football. I was quite, physically quite fit. But because of the toll that my mental health was taking on me, that was making me physically ill. I think when I look back, I used to spend long periods of time in a kind of fight or flight mode. I was so stressed, and I guess that physiologically that releases cortisol and adrenaline, and I couldn't think straight. And that would make me even more stressed, because I'm working in a creative industry where I need to sort of think outside the box and take a bit of time and everything. And that would make me even more stressed. And then I would do work that wasn't as good as I would like it to have been. And that would make me even more stressed.
And you're actually doing work in situations that everything goes to the crescendo of live broadcast, right? 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, it's very high pressured.
Yeah.
And I actually enjoy that. I enjoy that pressure. And I normally, under normal circumstances, I respond well to it. It brings out the best in me. But not when I was in fight or flight mode, it didn't. And I became very emotionally reactive. I became irritable. I became not always nice to be around. And that's not me at all, Chris. I'm very happy-go-lucky most of the time. And I'm quite pleasant company. But I became really irritable. And I would get low mood quite a lot. I'd spend days where I'd just be numb. I wouldn't feel anything. And I guess now, looking back, that's depression of a sort. I never got too in dark thoughts or anywhere like that. I would just be numb. I would wake up in the morning, bearing in mind the job I had, and I think I can't be bothered today. I just want to curl up under my duvet and not move. And I was going into work to work on sports broadcasting, a job I absolutely loved, but yet emotionally I was just spent.
So you've had this thankful collision of calendars where you actually didn't mean to be off, but you were, and you found yourself in those coffee shops in Amsterdam. Tell me about the thoughts, and then how those thoughts awakened a new vision for you.
Yeah, so after that holiday, I think we were there for about 5 days. I came back and work was quite chilled out because I was removed from that event, so I wasn't knee deep in it. So I made the connection. I thought, hang on a minute, I've I'm better. So why am I better? Why am I feeling better? Why haven't I got the sniffles anymore? Why has the colour come back to my eyes? The sparkles come back to my eyes. My skin's looking better. Why has that happened? So
And
I'm
sorry to. And did anybody else also say anything? Did Julie or anybody else say,
no,
"Hey"?
nobody knew.
Right.
Nobody, not even I knew, Chris. So nobody else did. So no, I was very good at putting on masks and um yeah, I wouldn't. I never acknowledged it myself. I mean, people, you would realize that I had constant sniffles and things, but nobody ever put the, we just thought there was something up with my immune system, and I was busy taking vitamin C supplements and all this sort of stuff. Nobody knew. And yeah, so I mean, it just occurred to me. I suddenly made the link between my physical and my mental health. I realized that what was different about that 5 days was the stress and the anxiety was gone, and the 100-mile-an-hour thought process had gone. Took myself out of that when I was in Amsterdam, and I suddenly realized that that was what was making me ill, and that was what had to change. And that's when, and then, as I said to you, I had various holidays. And then reading The Secret is what then made me realize it's all about your internal world. So I started to do some work on my internal world. I started mindfulness practices, breath work, meditation practices, practicing meditation every day. I built that up. I started by just doing 5 minutes every morning. And even that helped, Chris, just slowing the thought process down. And I suddenly started to realize you can choose the thoughts in which you interact with, engage with. Because I remember when I first read or listened to a podcast of somebody telling me that you can slow your thinking down, and that's key to give yourself that space. I thought, you can't do that. I thought, how am I going to do that? This constant. I thought that's just what happens as you grow up, right? As you get an adult and you've got more responsibility and you just got more stuff going on in your life. No, that's not true. You absolutely can slow your thinking down. And I remember then working out that thinking's only required in order to deal with tasks, and actually the rest of it is all just rubbish. And then working out what my ego mind was, and that was where the real breakthrough came, I think, because I thought that's who I was, realizing that isn't me, and that actually I'm the awareness, I'm the witness to what goes on, and not the ego mind. Yeah, so that was a big breakthrough for me. And then the weight started to drop off without me changing much about what I did. I think it's just that constant uncertainty, I think, that your body doesn't like, so it collects body fat. As I say, then once I let go of the idea of building my career at the BBC, and I said to my wife, right, I'm going to leave. In fact, I said I'm going to stay for one more Olympics. That was going to be the plan. Everything became easier. I wasn't overthinking everything. I wasn't attaching to outcomes and then dealing with great disappointment when things didn't happen. I suddenly became more flexible. Life started just to flow.
And how did you communicate that decision to say, I'm going to leave the BBC, which in itself is just a sentence that is stark and huge. Just to read that sentence, I'm going to leave the BBC, which has been with me and with so many people for so many years. It's sort of, sorry, you're going to do what?
So I sent an email, Chris. I sent my wife an email. I just sat there one day and it just came to me. I thought, right, I'm going to leave. This job isn't for me anymore. So I just sent her an email. I said, do you know, I think maybe we were talking about the future, and I went, you know what, I'm going to stay for one more Olympics. I'm going to leave. And she didn't believe me. She was like, no, you're not. I was like, no, I am. I'll do one more Olympics and that's it. I'm going. That's it. End of BBC career. And the weird thing was, as I say, from that, I let go of it. But then lots of opportunities came to me. So I ended up staying longer than I perhaps would have done. I got 2 promotions. I got to do all sorts of things. Don't get me wrong, I'd put the work in previously, so they didn't come out of nowhere. But the minute I stopped chasing after them, they came to me. I stayed probably a bit longer than I would have done. And when the pandemic came, that's when we realized about completely changing the lifestyle and being more self-sufficient and more sustainable, which was something we'd kind of thought about in retirement. we thought, oh, we'll get a house with a bit of land and grow our own fruit and veg, you know, in our 60s or whatever. And you know, lockdown came along and all that peace and quiet in that time, and we went, you know what, sod it, let's do that now. And then because of COVID, the BBC had to make cuts, so I got offered voluntary redundancy, and I was like, brilliant, that's it, that's a message from the universe. Took that voluntary redundancy, and then I had a huge wobble. It was at that point when I finally said, yes, right, that's it, I'm going to do it, I'm leaving. Then that's when my ego went nuts. Like, what the hell are you doing? You can't leave all these years of putting all this work. What are you going to do? How are you going to earn a living? Why are you giving away BBC jobs, staff jobs like gold dust? Why would you give up one of those? So yeah, I'd struggled then. So I got a bit of some coaching and some counselling there as well to help me through that, which was good. Yeah, and it was a massive relief then after that point that I'd managed to get to the point where I was ready to do it. And then when I did leave, I carried on working in broadcasting for a while. I was a freelance contractor. And I've really enjoyed having that bit more time and that bit more freedom about what I did. And also the fact you could go in, work on something and then leave and just leave it behind, walk out the door, and you don't have to worry about all the politics and bureaucracy and everything else that comes with working at the BBC. And that then gave me the time to start retraining to do something else.
And I don't want to get into a cultural or political debate, particularly bearing in mind the name Gary Lineker that you mentioned earlier. But is there something significantly wrong in terms of the culture of that industry as a whole, the freelance culture, the cancellation culture that exists, and there's so many eyes on it that they are not willing or brave enough to put the people at the center of their ethos?
Yeah, I don't know if wrong is the right word, Chris. I don't know if it's wrong, but I think there is something about that industry in which people's well-being is not looked after. Now, that's not because you're being put under pressure deliberately by anyone else. That's the pressure that people put on themselves. Now, when you work in something like sports broadcasting, you work for a corporation like the BBC, you feel privileged to do so. And to an extent, it is a privilege to serve audiences in that way, and to go to the sort of events you get to go to, and to work with the sort of people you get to work. It is a privilege, but what that then can become a bit toxic because it's a privilege, and because you know there are a million people queuing up who take your job tomorrow. You end up doing things you shouldn't do. You end up working double shifts. You end up weeks on end without breaks. And you know, really long days without breaks and things like that. And you shouldn't do that, because it's bad for your well-being. And probably, yeah, there is a culture of that in that industry, because that's how you get things done. And it's always funny when, for instance, when we go out to work in France for the Six Nations, you can't break employment law in France. They won't let you. In this country, we'll work 12 hours without a break. Can't do that in France. In this country, we'll work 2 weeks solid without a day off. Can't do that in France. They won't let you. And it costs us so much more to go out to France to produce television. And that's obviously the what it all comes down to. But people are willing to do it, Chris.
Mm. Well, it's the label. And I remember the day when we only had 5 channels or even 3 channels to press. And now it's so competitive, isn't it? The industry, in terms of the monoliths of the broadcasters, is not just BBC anymore. It's multifaceted. But I just want to talk about where you are now. And you made some huge decisions, Guiseley, to tell the audience where you are. But how long did it take you to think, that's it? We want to get some land, but this is it. And also, how am I going to make a living?
Yeah, so I guess in terms, so it was probably, so when the pandemic was 2020, wasn't it? So I guess that's start 2020 was when we made the decision to do it. And we finally moved here. So I now live in the Scottish borders, up in the hills, in a place called the Yarrow Valley, where I live, surrounded by 12 acres of my own land and not much else. There's nobody else really around here. There's another Our nearest neighbour's like 20 minutes walk away. It's a B&B up the road, and it's beautiful and peaceful and lovely. So that took 3 years all in all, or just less than 3 years. And yeah, so we decided that we wanted to completely change our lifestyle. We wanted more time, more space, more freedom. We wanted to be self-sufficient, and we wanted to be sustainable. And we didn't think we could do that where we were to the extent that we wanted to do it. So yeah, we decided to look for a house with some land where we could, get off grid as much as possible. And we realized that, and we didn't want to have huge debts. So we realized very quickly that probably Scotland was the only place we could afford to do that, with as much land as we wanted and the sort of property we wanted. It turned out that in lockdown, lots of people had similar ideas, so the market went crazy. So we were then looking further and further north. Then we changed our plan, and we were going to buy some land, some croft land, because you get subsidy to do agriculture on croft land. So we thought we'd buy some croft land and build our own house. Then the economy went even more nuts, and the cost of building went through the roof, and the cost of timber and all that. So we realised then we were going to be in massive negative equity. So we'd had an offer accepted on some land, and thankfully the conveyancer was rubbish. So the sale didn't go through very quickly. And then we realised that we got another quote from a house builder, and it was just astronomical, and we'd have been in serious negative equity. So we had to kibosh that. So again, then we went back to looking at houses, and yeah, we're fortunate enough to find this one, which already has its own private water supply, and it's not on the gas grid. So I want to find a way now to produce my own electricity, which will probably be wind, being up in the hills here. It's called Windy House where I live, and there's a good reason for that. And I've got 12 acres of land now to utilize for agriculture. I'm kind of starting small at the moment. I'm just growing a bit of my own fruit and veg. It's going to be a lot of trial and error, particularly up here, because there's only certain things that are going to grow particularly well. Apparently root veg and soft fruit is the way forward up here. Yeah, so it took about 3 years, and in that time, so I left my full-time job in the BBC February 2021. I took voluntary redundancy, so I got pretty well paid for that. So I used that money to invest in myself. I learned how to do neuro-linguistic programming, and I did 2 coaching courses. So one was the art of coaching, and one was masters of coaching. So they're both ICF accredited courses. And yeah, and then since then I've been setting up my coaching business. So I kind of transitioned. There was a while I was kind of setting up my coaching and starting my coaching whilst I still worked in broadcasting, and I still do bits and pieces of broadcasting, but mainly now it's my coaching business, which is all online and one-on-one at the moment.
And your particular sweet spot of person that you're looking to try to take out of the whole of adversity is what?
Well, I'm looking to coach people like me, Chris. So men in midlife who've got to the point where, they've got all the things that their culture tells them success looks like. So they've got a nice house, they've got a nice car, they've got the partner and the kids, and they've got a good job and a nice watch, and they wear nice suits, but they just feel horrible. They're miserable. They're not fulfilled. They've come to a point where they know there's got to be more to life. There's got to be some meaning and purpose in life. And their work-life balance is bad, and like me, they're suffering with that stress and anxiety and poor mental health. And I think, from what I can tell, it happens to a lot of guys once they get over 40. And probably it happens to women too, but they just have better support networks than us guys have. Because we do, particularly I think our generation, Chris, we weren't given the tools as youngsters to talk about how we feel. So we find it difficult to do it. We find it difficult to deal with our emotions. We find it difficult to reach out for help. I was brought up that you didn't reach out for help. That was weak. You dealt with things yourself, and you took responsibility for yourself. And whilst there's positives in that, I think we end up, particularly men of our generation, not reaching out and asking for help. So I employed several coaches along my journey, which has got me to where I am now. And I've realised how powerful it is in because our minds are so good at getting in our own way. And it took me a long, 5 or 6 years to get where I wanted to get, because I kept getting in my own way. I had all these limiting beliefs that I'd taken on from the world throughout my life, and it's very hard on your own to figure out what those are and change them.
And looking back now, reflectively, you were given an opportunity with the voluntary redundancy. What would you have done if that hadn't been offered to you?
That's an interesting question, Chris. It's an interesting question. So I'd always said my limit was going to be the Tokyo Olympics. That's when I was going to leave. So I think I would have done that Olympics and then left my full-time job. It just so happened that voluntary redundancy came along before then, and that really helped because it gave me some money to invest. And it's entirely possible that I may have procrastinated and not left straight away, and it may have taken a bit more time. I may have found another event to stay on for. I may have gone, well, actually, should I just do the next Winter Olympics, or should I do the next World Cup? So it's entirely possible that I'd have procrastinated and not left. I'd like to think that I would have done,
but even then, I detected that you had made some intentional choices around balancing work and your own well-being. Had you already started to position some pieces there to say, no, I must make sure that Daniel comes first before BBC? What were those kind of things?
Yeah, I absolutely had. So I absolutely had to put my own well-being first. I became much better at saying no. So I wouldn't do things that were going to, make me stressed, that were going to meant I got lack of sleep, which were going to mean I didn't have enough rest. I had got to the point where I was meditating every day. I was practicing breath work, and and I was factoring in a lot of rest and relaxation. I was prioritizing that, and I was prioritizing my well-being. So I'd got to the point where the job wasn't causing, because it wasn't really the job that was causing me problems. It was my way of doing it that was causing the problems. So I had completely changed all that, and I was completely changed how I was operating in the world and what my perspective was and what was important. And that career had definitely dropped down the list of what was important. I'd realized actually that relationships was much more important, and particularly my relationship with my wife was much more important, and that I had to put my own well-being first. So yeah, it had completely changed, and I could have carried on and been very well. And
when you had that vision of going to the Scottish borders, you must have had to tell a few people that this was part of your plan. How did you face into that dichotomy of, Daniel, have you completely lost your mind?
Well, yeah, I mean, people were always amazed. Yeah, so I did so I remember being on, because it was during the pandemic, so a big Zoom call with the whole department, and they said, right, okay, here are the people that are taking voluntary redundancy, and then they came to us one by one to talk to us, and they said, so what are you going to do? So I told him what I was going to do. Yeah, I'm going to buy a house with some land and go and live off grid and be self-sufficient and sustainable, and I'm going to do online coaching. And everyone was like, wait, what now? Some people found it very inspirational, Chris. People were really proud of me, actually. Some people thought I was absolutely bonkers. And still to this day, some people say to me, right, come on, Dan, when are you coming back?
And how much of that cynicism fuels your growth now to say, no, I am going to make this work, no matter how many naysayers from my past are waiting for me to come back?
I don't know, Chris. I'm not sure that it does, really, because I'm in a place in my life where I don't care what other people think. I'm not affected by other people's opinions. And what I'm affected by is following my joy and my passion, and for my meaning and my purpose. So, I'm now in a place where I don't have to worry about work-life balance, because my work and my life are the same thing. So there's no balance to be struck. I have a life where I'm my own boss. I have freedom. I have flexibility. And we're building a life where we're self-sustainable. So I'm not reliant on other people, which I think, particularly as a masculine thing, that's a lovely thing to do. And that it's very fulfilling to think like that. And to now have plans in place to bring in some renewable energy. So again, I'm off the grid. So again, I'm not reliant on other people. So yeah, I used to, that's exactly how I used to operate, Chris. I used to be an I'll show you. That was my motivation. That's how I got where I got to in the BBC. Because when I decided I was going to do it, a lot of people around me went, yeah, mate, you realize how difficult that is. You're not going to, you won't be able to do that. You won't. And I was like, well, I'll show you. But no, I'm a different person these days, Chris. And I don't really use that as motivation. What I do use it, I use it to make content, and I use it with my clients when people are very cynical like that. I write about it and I say this is about them, not about me. People who are projecting that are because they're full of self-doubt and worry, and they think, well, why isn't he? Why aren't you? Why, people would say to me, so what's plan B, Dan? I'm like, there's no plan B. There's only plan A. If I put a plan B in place, that's a good excuse not to execute plan A, isn't it? So there's no plan B. What if it doesn't work out? It will work out. That's the end of it.
Well, yeah, there are some that might say, well, yes, but he had the voluntary redundancy. He had the great career. He probably had a little bit of comfort to be able to take the next jump before there was no net.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
In terms of just trying to give people some nuggets, apart from reading The Secret, which is a great book, but it isn't just about the thoughts. It has to become also connected to action, which is what you've done.
Yeah.
What would be your 3 fundamentals for living a long, healthy, purposeful life, Dan?
Well, the thing I like to say to people, and this is not my saying, Chris, I've stolen this, but live by design, not by default. So far too many people that I talk to say, oh, I do this job and I kind of fell into it and I have to do this and I should do that. And, all those have tos and shoulds just, they're not true, right? So what I advise people to do is slow down, prioritize their own well-being. So, the world, we live in a world now that's everything goes 100 miles an hour. We're bombarded with information. So prioritize rest and relaxation, prioritize time where you are not connected digitally to the rest of the world, where you're not engaging with your job or whatever else that it is. Now, once you give yourself that time, you can start to discover who you are and what you really care about. So I would recommend people do practices that are mindful, Chris, so they can get out of their heads and into their body, so into how they feel. So that's how you get to know who you are, by how you feel about things. So you can understand your emotions and what they're trying to tell you. Now, once you get to that place, then be deliberate, make a plan, set goals, long-term, medium-term, short-term goals of what you want to achieve, and then set about doing it. Take action every day, no matter how small. Be very aware of what your ego is and how that works, and that inner critical voice and things like self-doubt. And you need to work on having self-belief, self-worth, and self-esteem. They're 3 incredibly important things. Now, to get anything done in the world, those 3 things those cups need to be full. So that would be my advice to people, is to slow down, give yourself the time and space to make sure you're as well as you possibly can be, and then work on those 3 things so you can be the very best version of yourself that you can. And get help, Chris, because we can't do it alone.
No, but I know that there will be somebody there saying, I'm sorry, Daniel, but I've got no time. I've got to do the kids. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. I've got to do this. How am I going to find 5 minutes for myself?
That's bullshit, Chris. That's not true. That just isn't true. It's a story we all tell ourselves. Now, I get it, right? I understand. I know that people have busy lives and a lot of responsibilities. But what you need to do, the first step I take right with my clients is we do a time audit. So we do that across 2 to 3 weeks, and we look at how we're spending our time, what time we're getting up, what time we're going to bed, each hour of the day. What are we doing? Where's our attention going? Where are we putting our effort and our energy and what we're spending our money on? That you'll find that's very revealing when you do something like that. You'll find that you're spending hours and hours and hours a week doing stuff you don't need to do. Challenge all those should do this, have to do that. Do you? Says who? Says who? Look at that stuff and then decide what you value and prioritize it. Don't be swayed by what you think other people think. Be very clear about who you are, about what you want, and then prioritize it and find the time. There is always time to do the things you need to and want to do, always. Now, I appreciate people have busy lives and children to look after. And these days, when you get to kind of midlife, you also start having to look after your parents a bit more too. And there's a lot going on. But it's all about priorities. And prioritizing your own well-being is not a selfish thing to do. Pleasing other people is not a wise thing to do for yourself and to get what you want and to be where you want to be. Now, you don't do any of this stuff at the expense of anybody else. You know, if you've got commitments you've made to other people, then of course you must keep your commitments and you must be there for the people that you love. But that's how you do it, Chris. You work out, you look at every part of your life. Where am I putting my attention, my focus, my energy? Where am I spending my money on? Do I really want to do that? Is that what I really want to do? Does that make me feel good? Does that make the people around me feel good? Does that bring me joy? Does that bring me long-term pleasure? Does that help my well-being? If it doesn't, then seriously think about stop doing it.
Well, fair enough, but there's also a supplement I can take, or an injection I could have, or some tablets I could do. I don't need all this kind of woo-woo stuff about meditation and R&R. What are your thoughts on those quick fixes?
Well, they're exactly that, Chris. They're quick fixes and they're short-term things. And generally, long-term, they're not going to be good for your well-being. Now, there is absolutely a place for things like supplementation to help you with exercise. And, because so much of our food is so processed these days, it's worth taking good quality organic supplements to help you. Absolutely it is. But, taking weight loss pills or things to help you bulk your muscle and stuff like that, they are short-term fixes. Unless you're going to carry on doing that for the rest of your life, which is probably going to kill you in the end, whatever it is you're trying to fix will still be broken when the short-term thing finishes. You've got to we are whole people, Chris. So if you want to change how you feel, how you look, how fit you are, your mental, physical and emotional well-being, it's a holistic thing you've got to do. So you've got to change your whole way of looking at yourself and looking at your life. You've got to challenge all of your views and your opinions and your beliefs, because they are the lens through which you see the world, and the world is how you see it. So there aren't any quick fixes for solving your problems, for feeling better, for being as well as you can be. This is long-term effort and focus, and it's internal work. There aren't any external answers for you. Everything you need to change in order to be the best version of yourself, everything you need to do happens internally. So that's why you need the woo-woo meditation and mindfulness practice. Do what works for you. Journaling is another good thing. Breath work's another good thing. Cold water therapy. Any sort of exercise is a good mindful practice. Running, or you'll find that you're in your body because you're feeling your body, and it teaches you resilience as well as you push through pain barriers when your mind starts screaming at you to stop. find what works for you. You know, you don't have to do the things I do, but do something mindful so you can understand how you feel, because your feelings will give you a clue as to the things you ought to be doing to bring you joy and for your well-being, and so you can be the best version of yourself.
Yeah, so much in that. The two words that really hit me there was effort and focus. That's so key to really become a master of this self-work and self-esteem aspects you've focused on.
Yeah.
And also that do what works for you. If you don't want to be a 5 a.m. club, you don't want to be in the plunge pool, you don't want to be doing the ultra marathons, that's absolutely fine. But please find something that does work for you, as opposed to just reaching for the quick fix. Dan, how do we get to find out a little bit more about you? I understand you've got a business called Positive Masculinity, and LinkedIn is a good place where you hang out, I understand.
Yeah, so that's mainly where you can find me. So yeah, if you search Dan Glide Coach on LinkedIn, so that's Glide with a Y, or Positive Masculinity. I'm also on Facebook, so you can find me there. I'm also on Instagram too, but I don't do a lot of work on Instagram. LinkedIn is the best place to find me.
Superb. Well, we're going to put those details in the show notes. I've asked you lots of questions. Was there something that you wish I'd scratched and I haven't quite itched it yet, in terms of something you wanted to leave us with as a thought?
I don't think so, Chris. I mean, as you say, it's the focus and the effort which is important, because what The Secret taught me where focus goes, energy flows. So whatever you put your attention on is where you're going to be able to make change in your life, right? So, and as I said earlier, live by design, not by default. Be deliberate. Don't just let life happen to you. I think it was John Lennon that said that life's what happens while you're busy making other plans. So be deliberate about your life. You know, make conscious choices. The one thing we have as humans, we're not victim of circumstance. We have choices. So be aware of that.
Well, gentlemen, if you are listening, and any ladies and gentlemen that are listening, there are plenty of people out there that need help. And here today are two people that are willing to hold your hand, pull you out of whatever hole you are in, and just give you a little push here and there to make sure that you carry on living the best life you can. Daniel Glide, I really want to appreciate you for your time today. Some real nuggets there for us to go back and listen to. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me on, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. And remember, everybody listening, for Prime Your Midlife, we do only have one life. So love life, living life.